Hello, everyone, and welcome to Counselor Feature Friday. I'm your host, Brian Urban. In these features, we hope to give you some simple tips, tidbits, and tricks to make your days easier and your patients happier. In this feature, we're going to talk about utilizing the card on file feature through the Gravity Payments integration. So we're going to begin here within an invoice. We already have an item selected, a box of batteries, and we're going to jump right to the Payments tab. So this card on file feature enables you to opt in to keeping the patient's credit card on file. So if it's needed later to either take a payment on the same invoice or a future invoice, you can do so without the card being present. Now it's very important to note at this point that Counselor does not actually save the credit card information. What happens is anytime you process a credit card through Counselor, Counselor is sending the encrypted information, or it gets encrypted immediately and sent to Gravity, also known as Charge It Pro, for the credit card processing. None of that data is actually seen or stored in Counselor. So what the card on file feature is doing is basically Counselor is able to send a message out to Gravity and say, hey, let's use that card again, but is not actually storing that information itself. Just an important point I want to throw out there right away. So what we're going to do next here is we're going to say, okay, let's walk through the steps here. We're going to go ahead and take a credit card payment. Now, I do not have a machine connected to this device, so what I'm going to, or to this my computer. So I'm going to go ahead and just say I'm going to key in the transaction. Before I do that though, you want to note this here. This is the opt-in. This is where you can say, yes, I do want to save this card on file. Okay, so we'll take a $20 payment when we go to process the transaction. In this case, because of the keyed in transaction, I'm going to go ahead and enter a fake number. Otherwise, you'd be using your credit card terminal at this point. All right, so I'm going to say, let's pay the $20. All right, so that's going to process the transaction. In just a moment here, it's going to save, and then we're going to see, okay, there's our transaction. If we said, okay, let's take another payment on this invoice or a future invoice, let's go through the same steps. We'll go private pay, credit card option, and we go to process the transaction. Now we'll be able to see in the dropdown, there is the card that we just entered. So you'll see the type of card it is, in this case Visa, and the final four digits of the credit card number. So that's all that's being saved in Counselor, not the full credit card number. Okay, so in this case I would say, okay, great, let's go ahead and select that. So I could go ahead and then process a transaction at this point for, let's say, the full amount. It's also important to note that you can also remove this credit card if it's on file. So perhaps you store the credit card, the patient maybe you're self-financing a hearing aid and they're making payments over time, right? And so you once a month maybe you set up a task and then you go in and you submit the payment using the card on file, and then maybe you finish that and you delete it. Or another example would be the patient's card has expired, right? Or the patient expresses that they'd rather you didn't run the credit card that way. Whatever the reason, you can always delete it. Now in this case, we're going to go ahead and let's do this. Let's just say we're going to take another $20 payment. Okay, so we process that transaction. So once again, using the card on file, we don't have to key in the number. Obviously, there's nothing involved in the machine at this point, and now we have our second transaction. But like I said, let's show that process then of deleting it. So we can go back in, we can go to the process transaction again, and this time we're going to say, okay, card on file, and we're going to delete it. Okay, just like that, the card is no longer on file. So it's removed from the record going forward. Doesn't affect transactions that have already occurred, of course, but it will remove it going forward. So point being, you do have the option of optionally saving a card on file, utilizing it later, and then managing that list by removing any cards that need to be removed. Of course, if you have any questions about this process, give us a call, email us, live chat with us. We are always happy to help. Thank you very much for joining us for today's Counselor Feature Friday. And as always, have a wonderful, wonderful weekend.